Over the past few weeks, a new wave of controversy has swept through the world of Formula One, and this time, it involves one of the sport's biggest stars, Max Verstappen, and the British media. The tension between the Dutch driver and the Sky F1 pundits has become the talk of the paddock, raising questions about bias, professionalism, and the role of media in shaping a driver's image. The core of the issue? Verstappen's direct comments about the British media and their treatment of him, which has stirred up a lot of discussion. But what really happened at the Interlagos Grand Prix? Why did Verstappen take aim at the British press, and are the criticisms valid? Is this something that needs further attention, or is it simply the latest chapter in a long-running rivalry? Let's take a deeper look. Max Verstappen's rise to dominance in Formula One has been nothing short of remarkable. After a stunning 2023 season in which he clinched 19 wins out of 23 races, it's clear why he's become one of the most talked-about drivers in recent years. With that much success, it's inevitable that the spotlight would turn to him not just from fans but also from critics. But the situation took an interesting turn when Verstappen, who had gone through a 10-race winless streak, finally broke his drought at the Interlagos Grand Prix in Brazil. While many were celebrating his return to form, Verstappen seemed to have other things on his mind. During the post-race press conference in Brazil, Verstappen threw a subtle jab at the British media. "I have a quick question." He began, "I appreciate all of you being here, but where are the British journalists? Do they have to run to the airport, or do they just not know where the press conference is?" The remark immediately caught the attention of pundits and fans alike, especially given the tense relationship between Verstappen and the British media. It's not the first time that the Dutch driver has been vocal about his frustrations with the press, and it certainly wasn't the last. Max's comments were almost immediately met with a response from the Sky F1 pundits, with Martin Brundle and David Croft addressing the situation in detail. Brundle, a veteran of the sport, wasn't too pleased with Verstappen's accusation, particularly given his own extensive history as a commentator and analyst. Both pundits discussed the reasons behind their absence from the conference and their perspective on Verstappen's criticism. According to Croft, the post-race press conferences are sometimes not attended by certain media, especially when it's primarily a written press event. They argued that the situation may have been misunderstood, with journalists attending to other tasks, and that British media were not deliberately avoiding the conference. But the issue didn't end there. Verstappen's father, Jos Verstappen, also weighed in on the matter, voicing his pride in his son's performance in Brazil and his belief that Max's victory shut down a lot of the criticism from British pundits. "Max has shown that he's the very best," Jos said. "The British journalists have been whining, but Max proved them wrong. His performance, especially that first lap in the rain, where he made up 6 places, showed everyone who the best driver really is." The comments made by Max and his father certainly added fuel to the fire, especially as the British media, led by Sky F1's pundits, began to defend their positions. For David Croft, the criticism was more about perception than the reality of the situation. "Sometimes," he said, "there's more to a story than just a soundbite or an opportunity to attack others." Croft explained that the nature of post-race conferences often means that only certain media are in attendance, particularly when it comes to written press conferences. "These events are primarily for written media, and I don't usually attend," he clarified, emphasizing that journalists might be gathering other stories at the time, confident they wouldn't miss any key moments at the FIA press event. But it wasn't just about the conference itself. The wider issue of British bias in the media was something that Verstappen and his father had been vocal about for some time. In fact, the more Verstappen spoke on the matter, the clearer it became that his frustrations with the British press weren't new. It's been building up for a while. Verstappen has long been criticized for his aggressive driving style and his dominance on track, and for some, the constant comparisons to other drivers, especially British drivers like Lewis Hamilton, have only added to the tension. Interestingly, Verstappen's frustrations were also shared by Adrian Newey, the famed Red Bull technical director. Newey had previously pointed out the bias he perceived within Sky F1's coverage, especially when it came to their treatment of Red Bull and Verstappen. He noted that the commentary often seemed to have an underlying tone of criticism, particularly when it came to Verstappen's racing tactics and dominance. Newey's comments reflected Verstappen's belief that the British media was often too quick to undermine their success, citing a history of similar treatment when Red Bull was dominant in the early 2010s. Verstappen agreed with Newey's assessment, saying that while commentators from other countries tried to remain neutral, the same couldn't be said for Sky F1. He felt that the British pundits, in particular, had a tendency to cross the line when it came to their criticisms of Red Bull, especially as the team continued to outperform others. Verstappen even noted that despite the negative press, it didn't bother him much. "It doesn't matter to me," he said. "The media will always have their opinion, but I know I'm doing my job." However, not all was lost between Verstappen and the media. Although his relationship with the British press has been strained, Verstappen maintained that he was more focused on his racing than on responding to critics. "I know that people don't always like my style, but that's part of being in this sport," he stated. "There will always be people who criticize, but that doesn't change how I race. My goal is to win, and that's what I'll keep doing." Despite Verstappen's insistence that the negativity from the British media doesn't affect him, it's clear that the tension continues to simmer beneath the surface. The situation intensified when Verstappen spoke about his experiences with criticism from British journalists, particularly regarding his driving style. He made it clear that his success had drawn plenty of attention, both positive and negative, and he wasn't shy about calling out those who seemed to focus on the latter. "I know what most people are like," he said, reflecting on the past year. "When you're winning, they have nothing to say. But when you don't win for a while, that's when they start coming out with all sorts of things." Verstappen also made a pointed remark about the wrong passport he had for the F1 paddock, a reference to the fact that as a Dutch driver, he didn't fit the mold of the media's favorite drivers, particularly when compared to British stars like Hamilton. He hinted that much of the criticism directed at him was rooted in the fact that he wasn't one of their own, and that was something he'd long come to accept. "I have the wrong passport for this paddock," Verstappen said, speaking candidly about the challenges he faced in the media spotlight. "It's nothing new to me. It's always been like this." Max's comments didn't stop with just the British press, though. They also pointed to the general atmosphere in Formula One, where the narrative often seemed to favor certain drivers over others. His frustration wasn't just about his own experience, but also about the broader dynamics at play. And while Verstappen certainly isn't the first driver to face criticism, many other champions, including Sebastian Vettel during Red Bull's domination years, he was among the few to call out the bias so openly. One of the most outspoken critics of the media treatment was Martin Brundle, a former F1 driver himself and a longtime broadcaster for Sky Sports. Brundle, who's no stranger to the pressures of commentary, responded to Verstappen's remarks during a podcast hosted by Matt Baker. Brundle admitted that while Sky F1's coverage might come under scrutiny, there was no intentional bias. He explained that being British himself, he was often accused of favoring British drivers, though he insisted that his approach was always to be as objective as possible. "I don't think we show bias," Brundle said. "We try to tell the story of British drivers with a bit more detail, but I like to think we're pretty balanced." However, Brundle's defense of the media did little to quell the tension. Verstappen's remarks about bias seemed to strike a chord with both the pundits and the public. His criticisms, while pointed, had a certain truth to them, especially given the complex relationship between the media and drivers. While Brundle's position was clear that Sky F1's commentary was largely neutral, there's no denying that British broadcasters might, at times, lean a little more favorably towards British talent, especially when they're competing against foreign drivers. As the media firestorm raged on, Verstappen's critics in the British media weren't the only ones who spoke up. Former F1 drivers and pundits also joined the conversation, with many weighing in on the nature of Sky F1's coverage and how Verstappen's success might be affecting the way he's perceived. One of the most notable figures to express his thoughts was Damon Hill, the 1996 world champion. Hill, a British motorsport legend, tweeted his support for Lando Norris, especially after the intense racing in Mexico that saw Max and Norris clash on track. Hill's tweet, which expressed a desire to see Norris win a title, was seen by many as further proof of the perceived bias in the British media toward British drivers. While Hill's comments sparked further debate, it was also clear that the underlying issue was not just about Verstappen's success, but also about how he was being portrayed in the media. The media's portrayal of Red Bull's dominance coupled with Verstappen's aggressive style had created a narrative that was difficult for some to shake. The story wasn't just about the races themselves, but also about the drama that followed off the track, with pundits and former drivers contributing to the growing tension. Still, it's clear that the narrative of British bias in F1 media is not one that's going to disappear anytime soon. For Verstappen, it's a constant battle, one that has played out in press conferences, social media exchanges, and even in his comments about the Sky F1 coverage. He's called out the media, particularly British pundits like Martin Brundle and David Croft, for what he perceives as a lack of neutrality when covering Red Bull and his career. In his mind, they cross a line when it comes to their criticism of him, whether it's about his driving style, his personality, or his success. For many, this ongoing saga between Verstappen and the media is part of the larger story of Formula One. Every championship era seems to bring its own set of rivalries, both on and off the track. But Max Verstappen's rise to dominance, combined with the media's portrayal of his success, has created a unique narrative that's hard to ignore. His story is one of overcoming adversity, standing up to critics, and proving time and again that he's not just the product of a good car, he's a driver who's earned his place at the top through skill, grit, and determination. And while the British media may continue to scrutinize his every move, Verstappen's focus remains clear. "I don't care what people say," he said, summing up his mindset. "What matters is what I do on track. I'll let my driving do the talking." Max Verstappen has already proven himself to be one of the most talented and determined drivers in the history of Formula One. Whether the media likes it or not, his dominance will likely continue into 2025 and beyond. As the rivalry between him and the British media plays out, one thing is sure: Verstappen's drive for success will only grow stronger, and his legacy as a champion will be cemented race after race.